So you're a PT or PTA grad who's feeling the spark of something more. Maybe you dream of building your own business, one that's constructed around your vision, one that empowers you to make a real difference on your terms. This feeling, it's the entrepreneurial itch, and you're not alone. Countless PTs and PTAs are taking the leap to entrepreneurship, crafting careers that are as unique as they are. Welcome to the Innovate and Rehabilitate, the Entrepreneurial PT podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of PTpreneurship with inspiring physical therapists and physical therapist assistants just like you who are crushing it on their terms. We'll uncover their secrets, their struggles, and the incredible impact they're making. From building your PT boss dreams to navigating the business side of things, we'll equip you with the knowledge and inspiration to turn your vision into reality. So, whether you're just curious about starting your own business or you're already out there making your dreams a reality, this podcast is for you. Get ready to unleash your inner entrepreneur. Let's do this.
Hello and welcome. I'm Scott Giles, founder of Score Builders, and I'll be your host for this podcast. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Dr. Alexis Shoope. Alexis is a board-certified orthopedic physical therapist and a certified strength and conditioning specialist with a deep passion for empowering her clients. She completed her doctoral training at Northwestern University and then pursued advanced specialization through Memorial Hermann's orthopedic residency in Houston, Texas. Alexis has developed a niche practice working with individuals experiencing back, hip, and pelvic floor issues, but what truly sets her apart is her extensive background in strength training and whole-body approach to care. In 2020, she founded PIONE3R Physical Therapy Wellness, a cash-based practice built on education, excellence, and empowerment, and the belief that people deserve more than quick fixes. The company's mission is to bridge the gap between rehab and fitness and to help patients continue to stay active while gaining the knowledge and tools to take ownership of their long-term health. Alexis, thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited
Absolutely.
to be here.
So let's turn the clock way back and talk a little bit about your decision to pursue a degree in physical therapy.
Yeah, so my story is similar to a lot of people. I was an athlete in, middle school and high school. And so I got injured, and it wasn't anything crazy, just an ankle sprain, but it had to be out for a little bit of time. And so in that period of time, I got exposure to physical therapy, and I had a passion for health for a long time and movement. And my dad was like, you should be a PA, but that just never, I was like, I don't know if that's it. And so when I got exposure to physical therapy, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, you get to extended time with people and help them progress back into a sport or things like that, which obviously was my exposure at the time. So yeah, that's honestly the main thing that got me introduced. But what's really cool in hindsight, when I was really little, I wanted to be a teacher. That, I think that's very common for kids. But I just loved teaching and loved explaining. And then once I actually got to PT school, I realized it is teaching. It's just of the body and movement. So it was kind of cool how that came full circle, but I didn't really know that until actually getting into PT school.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So you went to Northwestern, and did you have a sense at what point going through the program, did you get some sense of maybe where you wanted your early career path to take you?
Yeah, I would say I really, really tried to go in open-minded because I think a lot of people think they want to do like orthopedics or sports because that's most of their exposure. But I actually really enjoyed neuro. And then when I had I actually had a rotation in physical therapy school at Memorial Hermann, which is where I went to do residency. And so once I had that rotation and I had to work like pretty long hours there, I realized at the end of every day, I was like, oh, I'm actually not that tired of this, and I'm really excited for the next day. And I didn't have that feeling in my past rotations as much. And so I think that's when it really clicked for me, like, okay, I wanted to come in with an open mind, but I guess I do really want to do orthopedics and sports, basically. So it was after that rotation where I got exposure to it that I realized, like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do.
Good to know. I mean, it's a familiar story with a lot of people. Now, it's funny because the last, I think, 3 guests I've had on have all done residencies of some sort following graduation with their entry-level degree. Can you just talk to me about why you decided to pursue that path?
Yeah, so it was actually not my initial plan at all. My very best friend came into PT school being like, and we were in the same school together, basically saying from day one she wanted to go on to do residency. And that, when I was in PT school, it was still not as well known even as it is now, because I got into PT school nearly 10 years ago. So I was like, okay, yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't know if I want to do that, because to me, initially, it just seemed like more schooling. And, we'd been in school for so long at that point. I was like, I just want to treat. So long story short, when I had that same rotation I was referring to at Memorial Hermann, my faith is actually a huge part of my life. And so I was listening to a podcast, and it was about like pursuing excellence in your career and how like the Lord calls us to excellence. And pretty quickly, I felt like that was for me to apply to residency. But I basically kind of avoided that for like 6 to 8 more weeks because I just was like, this isn't what I want to do. Like, no way. And then honestly, the Lord kind of softened my heart, and I applied, and I only applied to that one. And my best friend and I both ended up getting in and going to the same residency. So It was pretty a wild story. It was not the original plan. And I do feel like that has set me up to be able to do what I'm doing today. I think that in itself gave me a ton of confidence to really do what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I don't think it's funny because I don't think I've talked to a single person who has gone through the residency process. And even if it ended up not, like in your case, not exactly what you ended up doing perhaps clinically, I think there are a lot of lessons learned during that process. And, just in terms of critical thinking and mentorship and everything else, it often translates to a lot of other areas of life and business. So your story sounds consistent with that. Okay. So you finished a residency. Tell us about your early career path before founding Pioneer.
Yeah. So I finished residency, and then I stayed on for an additional 3 years, not the locations I was in residency, but still in the same system. And was able to, I kind of became like the hip and back specialist at my location at that time. And I really enjoyed that. It was a population I liked treating, and we worked with pretty active individuals for the most part as well. And then really in 2020 was when Pioneer kind of started. So it was more so like a side gig for like the end of 2020 until the beginning of 2022. So I was still at the same previous location all the way through the beginning of 2022. So up until I actually left to pursue Pioneer full time, I was the hip lead and the spine lead, and then additionally was the orthopedic mentor for the resident at our site. So that was kind of what that looked like for me. So a lot of things I really enjoyed, but also juggling a lot of things at once.
Yeah, especially while you're trying to get, Pioneer off the ground. All right, so how did the concept of Pioneer germinate? And then talk to us about what it was in terms of the early stages as you're just trying to, again, get this on people's radar and get things off the ground.
Yeah. So, in 2020, things were different than normal, but I, again, kind of like I mentioned, my faith is a huge part of my life, and I pray for a word over the year every year. So in 2020, I got the word dream, which is, I've never really been a big dreamer. I didn't go to PT school thinking I'm going to start my own business later, anything like that. And during that time, because of COVID, having way more time than I originally had, just extra, I actually felt like the Lord called me to start Instagram again, which I had done previously in PT school. I had started using it, to share my faith and share fitness, but that was before I really had like a deep understanding of the physical therapy side of things. So then in 2020, I kind of felt like I was supposed to restart that, but more from a physical therapy lens. And then I actually shared my like very large debt-free journey very publicly as well, from student loans. And so that's kind of how it started. And I started getting exposure to a lot of people who were doing things very differently via social media, just like, they have their own clinic, but they're like out of a CrossFit gym, or they're out of like a smaller gym, and they're seeing people one-on-one and they're paying cash. Like, I had no idea that any of that existed. And a big reason for that was because in Texas, we didn't get direct access until 2019. So we were the second to last state. Yeah. And it was super limited, still pretty limited, honestly. So it wasn't happening here, or it was not publicly happening here, I guess. So really in that year of 2020, I had a lot of time to like just see what other people were doing and like pray and process about things, and reach out to some people that I'd become friends with on Instagram just because I was using it pretty publicly at that point. So that's kind of what started it, like starting to see that some of these things existed, and that I liked my previous job a lot, but I knew there was something missing. And a big part of it was just the one-on-one side and to work with people who are willing to pay and invest in their health, which is just a little bit different. So it was a lot of exposure to other people and what they were doing and talking to them that kind of really sparked the interest. And so when I started with my husband, the LLC, at the very end of 2020, I announced it publicly like the beginning of 2021 via social media. And really what it started as was mostly, honestly, just custom programming. So it was pretty much like fully virtual. And what I would do was I worked with a lot of people who, let's say they had gone to traditional PT, let's say they had an Achilles tendinopathy, and they'd gotten better, but they still didn't feel confident with running or playing basketball again. And so I would like bridge the gap basically as a strength coach with the PT brain of like, okay, here's what we could do for you that's missing. to allow you to get that full circle to be able to fully do what you want to do. So that's all that it was really for like the first year. And I would basically have like maybe 4 to 5 clients a week that I was touching base with just to see how things were going. I would adjust their programming. And that's what I did for the first year of it. So I did that while also still doing my full-time job. And so basically my husband did like all the chores, all the groceries, all of that in that year where I was doing a lot of things all at once. So that's kind of what it looked like initially.
Sounds like a strong team. That's great.
Yeah.
Did you, just I want to digress 1 second. You were talking about your debt-free journey, that's not debt-free are not words that physical therapists use often. So I'm just curious, like, what did that look like? Did you have a specific kind of philosophy, or was it just talking about, early payment plans, or like, just give me a little insight into that, because that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So that was something that, Northwestern is an amazing school, but it's not cheap. And so I came out with, thankfully I didn't have any loans from undergrad, but came out with a lot of loans. And I had that in the back of my mind the whole time PT school. I was very much aware of that. I wasn't just like pretending they weren't going to exist. And when my husband and I got married, we had a conversation before we got married, but once we got married, we were like, okay, what can we do to make this not be a thing for very long? And so long story short, we ended up meeting with our financial advisor, who was like, you could actually pay this in 2 years if you really, really work super hard and like are very restrictive. You guys could. And so that was a lot faster. We were thinking like, I don't know, maybe 4, just guessing. And so we just set on this very public journey. We shared exactly how much debt we had. We would share how much we had paid off. We showed like a classic little thermometer that we'd fill in as we hit milestones. We created like almost like a little, levels when you pay off 10% or 15%, then we would get to do small things. So like we would go to a nicer dinner where we could spend like max $100, which we were not doing at the time. So it definitely helped that part of that was during COVID, because the temptation to travel was substantially less. But yeah, we just were very public about it, how we spent our money, what we were not doing. And so we just shared that very openly for like the 2 years until we ended up paying off in 22 months. So
that
it was really
amazing.
cool just to see how it encouraged other people, because I think the expectation is like, oh, you're just going to pay these forever. And that was, again, like as a part of our faith, that's not what we wanted to have behind keeping us from being more generous with our money. So that was kind of why one of the many reasons we did it.
Yeah, I like it. And I could also see kind of, if you're going to make your journey that public, you kind of have to walk the walk.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, in other words, all of a sudden, right, you go off the rails and you just disappear. You stop posting.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not very inspirational, right? But right. Talking about like you did. Let me ask you this. So with the social media part, you did some things in school, you said related, primarily to, to fitness and being a PT student, et cetera. And then obviously you put this very public, journey in terms of reducing your student debt online. Okay. I would imagine that background in social media, et cetera, has probably been an asset for your business creation, has it not?
Yeah, for sure.
What role do you think social media has in your present business?
Yeah, so I think, when I left my previous job at the beginning of 2022, and it was just me, I had a lot more time. So I was before that very consistent, posting like 4 to 5 times a week and on stories probably basically every day. And so I think when I left my previous job, I had about 20,000 followers. Wow. Which that's a good amount. But when you're in the city of Houston, it's huge. So I didn't expect that to help the business much, to be honest. I was like, well, we'll see. But probably when I first started the business, for the first year, I would say it was almost 75% off of Instagram and 25% word of mouth.
Wow.
Because there'd be somebody who knew somebody who lived here, or somebody whose friend or their aunt or their cousin. So I was actually pretty shocked at how it really, ultimately gives you authority, and it makes people know who you are. They feel like they know you before they've ever met you. So, and I don't share like everything about my life by any means, but I think people just feel like they could relate. So I was really shocked. I was full within 3 months, which is not normal, and I think that was a huge piece of it. So it continued to grow. And I would say probably until about like maybe towards the middle or end of 2023, I stayed that consistent. Since then, I've hired a lot. We've grown a ton. I barely have time to really touch my personal Instagram anymore, which is hopefully a goal for 2026, because I actually don't treat very much now because I'm running the business. But Yeah, I think it really, really helped. I think it still helps somewhat now, but probably not to the level it used to, just because I can't be as active. I do think having done it for so long, though, there is still like people still maybe know who I am in the PT realm just because of it, which is very helpful.
Right. And I love the fact that, early on, right, you don't have the kind of resources to hire other
Yeah,
people to do some of these things. But as your business has grown and you've taken on more responsibility, now you're in a better financial position to
right.
delegate, et cetera. But I also think it's inherently valuable for you to have gone through that process itself, because I'm sure to some extent, even though you're not maybe executing the social media strategy, obviously you're influencing it from, an area of expertise or something that you've experienced personally. So I
Right.
think you're obviously very hands-on as far as that goes. So as the business starts to grow and you're kind of moonlighting, which is exactly what we did with Score Builders, it was a while before we decided that, at the time, we had a couple kids at the time, and they were young, and
Okay.
we ended up having a third child, which is wonderful. But I mean, you can only do so much at any given point, and so it
Right.
becomes a constant juggle in order to do that, and very hesitant at some. It makes your risk taking maybe a little more risk averse,
Yeah.
simply because you're walking away from a guaranteed 40 hours a week, a given paycheck, et cetera. So, two questions related to that. One,
Mhm.
did you have a formal business plan kind of in place, and did you work with, are you naturally kind of just inclined towards that, or did you surround yourself with a team of people? I know you said previously you sat down with your financial advisor, but were there other people that you used to kind of chart this journey, or was it just more spontaneous and organic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had reached out to several different people via Instagram who were already kind of doing it, and had picked their brains on like, what are the platforms you use? How did you decide what to do? So a lot of it was just conversation based initially. When I was probably right around a year in, maybe a little bit longer than that, between a year and a half, I ended up joining the mastermind offered through PT Biz, and so that has helped a ton. A lot of it was learning from other people, people who own businesses but weren't necessarily cash-based PTs before. And so I've been in part of that mastermind now for over 3 years probably, and that has really, really helped. So when I brought on my first hire was another physical therapist. The big hurdle I faced actually was that everyone wanted to come see Alexis because I had not created really a business brand. People didn't even probably know the name of Pioneer, to be totally honest. And so that was if I had a vision ahead of time, like starting to say Pioneer more, starting to like show the
Interesting.
logo more. So I had, even though the PT I hired is an amazing PT, I still had people who were willing to wait 6 to 8 weeks to see me. So one of the things I had to learn was like, no, I'm not seeing anyone new. I couldn't give them a timeline because people would still wait, only because they felt like they knew me, even though the new PT was awesome, had the exact same training as me, went through the same residency, So, yeah, I think, anyway, to answer your question, a lot of it was organic. And then once I joined the mastermind, it was like, oh, here are all the things that I could be doing better. And so each hire since has been substantially better. And
No,
people
that's
actually
great.
know the business, not just Alexis.
I mean, I just find, mentoring of any type allows you just to take shortcuts that you would just, you don't always need to learn from the school of hard knocks. You
Right.
know what I mean?
For sure.
And there's going to be enough challenges that come up that you maybe can't prepare for, but to learn from someone who's already battled some of the same battles is pretty cool. So when did you decide, or how did you decide to, okay, I'm going all in on this, and you step back from your regular work, and what was that discussion like with your significant other, et cetera?
Yeah. So basically, like I shared, I had announced it publicly on social media at the beginning of 2021, but then I never talked about it again. And so granted, I was seeing a small percentage, but I wasn't publicly advertising that I could help people or like sign up at this link. So I said it one time, and then those people from word of mouth would basically just create more people for me. So for that entire year, it was like, man, I'm basically not doing anything, and it's filling itself. It was a small percentage of time, but I was like, there's no way that I can juggle this forever. It was too much. But I knew that it would have a deadline. So basically, with processing it with my husband and praying about it, felt like the best time to leave would be when the resident that I was over was switching clinics. So that way I could stay through their full rotation, not leave them kind of like without someone over them. And so that just happened to be that our program makes the switch in February and August. And so for me, it made sense for February of 2022. So that's how I decided, and was like, okay, well, I had the blessing of being married. So if it didn't go well, then I wasn't just me making money for myself. So that was a huge blessing. But I was like, okay, well, at some point I'm gonna have to make the decision to do this, or I need to decide to completely back out of it. And so just felt led to fully do it, and felt like the most honoring time was whenever the resident was switching, so I could feel like I had done all I could on my end, because there's never a perfect time to leave.
No, of course not. And it's nice to know you're thinking of others while you're going through that process as well, in addition to obviously trying to advance your own kind of goals and dreams. So how did then, how did the business evolve? And give us an overview of kind of what it's like today, what it's grown into. I know it's somewhat of a monstrosity, which is fantastic. But talk to us a little bit about your growth and what it's been like, some of the challenges of, obviously, when it's not just you and you're bringing on other people, and now you have, employees you're responsible for, et cetera. What's that been like?
Yeah, I can kind of walk you through, like, from when I left to now, like how the growth has been, since it hasn't been like a crazy amount of years. I can remember it pretty well. So yeah, I left in February of 2022. Before that, I had a friend of a friend who knew a personal trainer who had like a 1,400 square foot space. It was just all appointment based with him, who was wanting a PT in the space. So before I left, I actually already had a connection of where I was going. So that was another huge blessing. So when I left, I was going to be, I told myself I wanted to see about 20 people a week, because I still wanted to have time to build a business. And that was something that a lot of people I talked to were like, do not go to filling a schedule of like 40 clients a week, 40 hours patient only. You will not have time to do anything business related. And you might feel like you don't need that when it's just you, but even if it is just you, you need some of that. So that was from wisdom from other people. So yeah, in 2022, I left, was subleasing from that group of personal trainers, and that was February 2022. And then by the end of that year, I was full with a wait list of probably 6 to 8 people at all times. And I was like, okay, I either can stay like this, which is okay, nothing wrong with that at all, or I can grow, and really felt led by the Lord that, like, okay, I think you're actually called to grow a team. And so that's obviously maybe a little harder than staying by yourself, but there's, the ability to grow and kind of do different things from there. So I announced that I'd be hiring, I think, like towards the beginning of maybe like February, March of 2023, and then hired the first PT to start in May of 2023. Okay. And that's when a lot of the hurdles of realizing that, like, no one knew the business name. I wasn't really building a business brand. I was still building like only a personal brand. So had to go through, how do I teach people that it's not just me, and hopefully down the road people realize that Alexis hires really good people. It's not just that Alexis is a good PT. And honestly, everybody now is better than me because I treat the least amount. But yeah, so that was May or June of 2023 when the first PT joined. And then by February of 2024, I would have to decide if I wanted to stay at the sublease or if we wanted to look for something else. And so really the space was pretty tight for 2 of us in there, and we wouldn't have been able to have any other PTs. And I think I just started being like, man, I really want this to be like Pioneer. Like, I love what I've had the opportunity to save money, to be on a sublease, to learn from how they've done their business, which was a huge blessing. But I want to build like what Pioneer fully is. So started looking for our own lease at the end of 2023, and signed that probably about April of 2024. And right before that, finally hired an admin, which a lot of people have hesitancy with hiring that before a PT, because the admin isn't quote unquote revenue producing, but they free a lot of your time so that you can go and build the business. And so I often will encourage people, like, doing the admin first is not a bad idea. For me, and being in a sublease, it wouldn't have made sense because there was nowhere for her to be housed, as far as like she'd have to be virtual. But anyway, so I hired the admin probably March of 2024. We moved into the new space March or April of 2024. So at this time, it was me, a PT, and an admin. And then I was also pregnant at this time. Wow. So I knew that we had enough volume to hire, but also, like, if I wanted to have some help during maternity leave. So if I didn't find a good fit, then we weren't going to hire. But if I did, then great. And I'll hopefully train them before I go into labor, and then they can help with some of my caseload, but then also they can help going forward because now we're in a bigger space. So ended up being able to find someone and hired the second PT, I think like end of May 2024. And I ended up going to labor a little earlier than expected, but I got like about 4 or 5 weeks overlap with her. I really wanted like 6 or 8, but it was okay. So
hard to predict.
Yeah. So then it was a team now of me, 2 PTs and an admin. And when I came back from maternity leave, I was like, okay, I've got to reduce how much I'm treating. At that point, I was probably seeing about 17 people a week. So I hadn't reduced too much from when I started at. So then when I came back from maternity leave, I dropped to 12. Because I was like, I know I'm going to need more hours to pour into the employees. I'm going to need more hours just for like marketing and networking and stuff. So I had a 4-month maternity leave. And when I came back in October, I reduced how much I was seeing actual patients, and then continue to grow the business, really pour into it. At this point, like people know the brand, which is nice. I wasn't having to like an uphill battle. People actually weren't even requesting me as much because I had really tried really hard to highlight who these other people were. And, or they would call me being like, I'm willing to see you and your team, which was nice. It was no longer like, I'll just see Alexis, which took a lot of work, but it finally happened. Even just simple things like Google reviews, making sure they weren't the first like 50 or 60 were me, but that's because I was the only one there, you know? And so anyway, so then we've been at that sublease. We're still there. I mean, not sublease, main lease, which I'm really thankful for, but we're kind of really busting out the seams there. But I think it's good to just like continue to grow there and not necessarily feel like we have to move immediately. But I hired the most recent PT in July of this year. And so now it's 3 PTs besides me and then an admin. And then we were actually hopefully onboarding another kind of front desk marketing person, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So
that's great. That's a pretty quick trajectory, quite frankly, right?
Yeah.
Which is obviously you've done a lot of things right. And I think it's really interesting too, the piece about how you did, how you realize, okay, why is everyone asking for me? Why is this about me and not Pioneer? And then how you change your strategy, based on that and rewarding when you see people start asking for other people or being willing to see other people, because you can't clone yourself and there's only so much you can do. And like you said, a lot of times, like you have the big name because that's the brand you built, but there are other clinicians who are probably equally as good, or at least in some cases. And like you said, maybe even better, because now they are better. You're growing in other areas that aren't just clinical, where their primary focus obviously is clinical. Tell me about, so what's really unique about Pioneer, and talk a little bit. I know your strength training background is extensive, but tell me how that kind of plays in and kind of makes your clinic maybe more unique or specialized than some of the other of your competitors. Yeah.
So in general, I think one thing that's fun is it's women owned and women run. We're all women right now. So I think that's always a fun piece for specifically our women clients that are like, oh, wow, how cool. And you have knowledge in the strength training world that, it's trendy to want to build bone density. It's trendy for some of these things, but people, especially the older population, maybe they're, 50, 60, they've never touched weights really in their life or very minimally. So that in itself, I think is really fun. But Houston is great for just overall the medical center here, and a lot of the medical staff and people kind of in the city are really great. But there's still very, very much almost every clinic that's not a really small clinic is seen with 2 or 3 people an hour. A lot of them, they don't give them anything for an HEP. If they give them anything, it's a piece of paper. So like, just the fact that we video record every single video we send them home with, they fully know their program is through an app with reps and sets, and they can communicate with us. Like the overall quality of their time and accessibility to us, I think is huge. But yeah, so we get a ton of people who have had PT before and just felt like something was missing. And so we get to kind of fill that in for them. And then I think additionally, because we're all residency trained right now, we do a very good job of being clear about diagnosing. And again, there's some times where, it's not clear, but we try to be very clear on like why we think it is what it is. Because a lot of people leave being like, well, they just told me I have tight hips. Well, what does that mean? And they get a better understanding of what's going on and why it's going on. And then additionally, like our clinic looks more like a gym. So we purposely, like something as simple as we actually call all of our clients, not patients. So they feel like it's different and like they're not sick. There's not something wrong. And I think that just something as simple as that, we try to change. We try to make all of our treatment rooms look more like, not like a typical medical treatment room, and things like that. So small things like that, I think, set the experience apart, especially if someone's word of mouth referral, right? They had a friend or family member that came. And something also small is like every person that leaves, they get like a welcome bag. And so they get certain things that have Pioneer on them and make them feel like excited that they're part of like a brand and a team and not just another patient that we make money from or something.
Yeah. I like how how consciously you built the brand itself, even in terms of the environment that folks are working out and how you address them. Just the human elements of what you guys are doing is interesting. One thing I was just thinking about is you mentioned that Texas was very late with the direct access. So you were obviously pretty early on the cash-based kind of side on physical therapy. What was that transition like? Was it, in terms of even your attitudes of your patients or expectations of patients? Can you talk about a little bit of that? Because again, you're not to use the term, but you're kind of a pioneer to some extent in that as well. So just I'd like to hear your insight on that.
Yeah. So this is where I think social media really helped because people were like, okay, yeah, I mean, if I have to go get a referral after I see you all, because most people are like, I don't want to have to deal with that, but in the state of Texas, we still have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, well, I know I want to work with you. So I would just educate them up front and be like, hey, you have to get it within this amount of days. But I had, from the residency and from staying on where I was for those 4 years, I had so many relationships with the physicians where it was very easy, like, hey, you can go see this person who I trust and I worked with for the last 4 years. So it wasn't like, okay, you can come in, good luck finding a physician if you don't have one. I was able to connect them with someone. So I think that was very helpful. But I think that's where social media was really helpful because they had already decided that they were going to work with me or with people at Pioneer. And so that barrier of being like, I have to additionally, go get a referral, even if like nothing was like a yellow flag or red flag, we still have to do that. So I think that really, really helped. I think another big advantage is, as massive as the city of Houston, we still really don't have that many other cash-based PTs besides kind of more solo single practitioners. Most people that have gone on, they've stayed just them. There's probably like maybe 3 others that are kind of like what I am.
Wow, that's interesting.
So a lot of people have not gone on to do, we would be one of the bigger cash-based practices. So yes, it was a huge advantage, doing it as early as I did. Another big advantage was with the previous location that I was at before leaving for Pioneer. It took, it was a large hospital-based system, so it took a long time before they could implement direct access naturally because they have to go through all the things, right, which makes sense. But me and one other guy were the top 2 direct access providers for like over a year. And so they were tracking that. And a lot of that was not from Instagram. That was just me being like confident in the skills I had, confident, like bring in your dad that you keep mentioning, like I'll help him, and
Sure.
So I was selling physical therapy, which I was selling on Instagram. So I had practice, which I didn't realize it was that until I got into business and like, oh, that's what I was doing when I didn't realize. So me and the other guy who were the top 2 have left to do our own thing. And so it's just like, there were skills I had, I think that were a little bit innate, that allowed it to be better for me. And then I got to actually learn more about that. Once I joined the mastermind, I learned how to teach that to other people because most PTs, that's not a skill that they normally have or they don't think about in that way.
Right.
So
you're very business savvy, or you certainly come off that way. And obviously to have the success you have had in a short period of time, obviously, tells me there's something more. So, so I know that there's no doubt in your very few microseconds of free time that you probably are thinking about the future. I mean, what do you guys look like in 5 years? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I would love to be in a much bigger space. Our space right now is just under 2,000 square feet. So I'd love to be in like maybe around 5,000 square foot. First, I would like to have one large location. I don't know if I want multiple locations down the road. My husband is very business minded, so he's always like, yeah, because I want to have the culture that people know they get the same experience like when they come through the doors. And so I'd love to have a bigger location that's, let's say, 5,000 square feet. Let's say it's 2 or 3 admin marketing people, maybe like 6 to 7 PTs, including myself. And then I'd love to have a dietitian and then a strength coach on staff. And I'd love to have like group fitness classes for people who just want to stay on. And maybe we focus on one that's, I don't know, more back specific or one that's more pelvic floor specific, those kinds of things. So something like that. And I'd love to, we really want to be a PT business that's also known for education. And so we've got a couple things that are coming that are going to be more passive income, but are more educational, or people can join a membership from afar. So really being a place that's known for the quality that we can provide in person, or the really like the team that, like, you know, across the gym, there's a culture that comes with that, a family that comes with that. And we don't need to be across a gym, but something like that where people are excited, you know, it's not just like, oh, I have to go do these things. They want to come, or they tell their friends. So those are all small things I'd love to have in the next maybe 5 years, maybe not all of those things in 5 years, but definitely like the bigger space and growing towards some of that.
It's good to speak it into the universe regardless, right? Because if I'm a betting person, a lot of these things are going to happen, which is great. So Alexis, finally, what do you have for words of encouragement for people who maybe, boy, they're listening to this and they're thinking like, this is so cool. I would love to be able to do something like this, entrepreneurial, to have the confidence that Alexis has, to be willing to take the risk. I mean, any kind of lessons along the way or words of inspiration that you might share with people?
The very first thing that comes to mind, I would say this specifically if it's PT students, right, that are listening to this, probably
Primarily.
So many of them now, and again, I'm less active on social media, but when I was more active, would be like, I want to do this immediately. And I would honestly say, don't go straight into this. Like, unless you're going to work at a cash-based place, if they're really, really going to pour into you. But because you really operate almost as a primary care when you're kind of in an island and no longer part of a large system. But so many of them don't want to go into the typical model because, unfortunately, like burnout and seeing so many people, and it's exhausting, but you get really good at your job because you see so many reps. So obviously that's where residency is very helpful. But that's one thing I would say is like, I mean, I love what I'm doing now, but like I had a lot of the confidence because I was around people way ahead of me in their career who could teach me, pour into me, show me how to collaborate with physicians and do that well. And so I think that's the first thing that comes to mind is like, this could be a dream. That's great. I love what I'm doing now, but also maybe not doing it immediately when you don't even know how to be a PT yet. So let yourself be a PT first without trying to manage the business side. And then secondly, I would say, like, let's say they are a couple years out and they're having these thoughts. Then I think more than anything else, it's like, I was actually presenting at a university on a panel for this kind of thing. And one of the questions was, you know, all of you guys are clearly successful. What about all the people who aren't? Like, what happens to them? And actually, one of my colleagues said this, and this probably isn't 100% true, but I think the point is really good. He was like, I think most people who are not successful are those who just never start. So people are afraid to ever start. So there's really not that much overhead when you're starting this, especially if you're by yourself, right? You don't have to buy 5,000 things. You can basically get a room somewhere, have a treatment table, buy a few things, and you can treat people well. Because a lot of what we do is education and teaching them. And so I think if someone does have this dream, like most people who maybe aren't successful are those who just don't start or who go way too fast. But I haven't heard of very many businesses like this that have gone under. I'm not talking to everyone, you know, but I think that's the biggest thing is like, give yourself some time to like learn how to be a PT. And then if it's really what you want to do, okay, figure out a way to do it. And you do not have to do it perfectly. I think probably one of the reasons that this has been successful in the way it has is I am absolutely not a perfectionist at all. I am totally okay, that's good enough. Let's run with it and let's make it better over time. And so people who are maybe more perfectionists will never start. It's like, well, what if I say it this way? And so then it comes off this way to someone. Like, you can't do that. Like, you're always going to come off maybe not perfect to somebody, but then you get to have the chance to have a conversation and communicate. So don't let yourself be a perfectionist. And at some point you just got to start.
That's great advice. Yeah, it is funny because there are so many people who believe, you know, I'll just wait till the right time, or I'll do this or that. And the other theme that you mentioned that I think is super important, because again, this is a lot of these same themes come up in the different talks, regardless of how different people's businesses are or what they're doing in PT. But I think one of the universal ingredients is become a great PT, like literally have the skills to draw from, surround yourself by people who are better clinicians than you. And then, keep the entrepreneurial fire burning, you know, create the idea list, journal, do whatever it takes. But to be honest, you don't have that many entrepreneurial opportunities if you're not a very good PT. And even if you can build a brand, you can do these other things. If you're not getting people better efficiently, and let's be honest, if it's cash based, I also feel the expectations are somewhat different, right? You've got to, you've got to be providing a superior service. And I also agree that, you know, I think you can fail quickly in these situations. And I think sometimes when things don't work out for people, I think they've learned a lot in the process and they pivot to a little bit different business model or a business idea or a location or a target audience. And so, there are almost every entrepreneur at some point has been unsuccessful. Maybe not with their initial business, maybe with their initial, maybe with later businesses, et cetera. But all along the way, their skill set is just ramping up at incredible speeds. And I think it even makes you more aware of opportunities that may exist out there that you wouldn't have even considered previously because it wasn't on your radar. So I think once you open that up, the possibilities become so common. I think it's so many areas of physical therapy. And the other thing, I actually just had my insurance renewal, and I was looking at my copay for physical therapy services, which is outrageous, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I also feel that reality is making cash-based not seem as much of a, it's not even that big of a leap compared to, what you're paying on some of these other things anyways. And now you're not getting triple teamed in terms of, 3 other patients all being treated by the same person at the same time, et cetera. You're getting superior service, maybe at a little bit more, money, but not at a level that's very justified by the level of care that you're receiving. So I just see these opportunities in the future as becoming just more and more mainstream and more opportunities in some cases in very non-traditional ways. And you've been a wonderful example of that. And I'm really happy for your success. Alexis, I want to thank you very much for jumping on the podcast. I think your story will be very inspirational to others. Love the work ethic, love the faith-based piece too, that you feel you're being led in a certain way and you're working hard to make that a reality. And I really want to applaud you for those efforts. And obviously love the women-owned, hiring people who have gone through residency like you, so expert clinicians, putting your money where your mouth is. And it sounds like it's really paying off both, financially and more importantly, that you feel good about what you're doing. You're helping so many people change their lives. So thank you.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Obviously it's not perfect, but it has been really fun to build, and, who knows what'll happen in the next few years. But I again, like I said, I never would have thought this is what I was doing in PT school, but it has been just a huge blessing to be a part of.
Yeah, how cool. And sometimes just when people, when this comes out and you're actually listening to it, or if you go back to listen to it one time, it's kind of neat to even just think about where your journey started and where you've come in such a short period of time. So you should be really proud of that. I'm very excited for you. But thanks again. And thanks to all our listeners out there. And we'll be back next month with another interesting entrepreneurial story.
And there you have it, another dose of PT-preneurial inspiration to fuel your journey. Check out more inspiring stories from PTs and PTAs out there making waves by listening and subscribing to our podcasts on your favorite streaming platforms. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast. Thanks for listening.